Thanks. First thing I'd like to do, can you all hear me? No.
Yes.
I've got that up here. How about now? Now, is it okay?
Yeah.
Better? Better? I hope it's better. Okay. First of all, I really would like to thank Chris Rollins and the organizing committee for inviting me here today to speak with you. And I'd like to have everybody give Chris a big hand. He's a great organizing this and putting this together. The timing is perfect with the Mango Festival, with the fact that a lot of the fruit crops are available at this time of year. It takes a lot of work for Chris and the committee to put this together. I also want to introduce the new Tropical Fruit Crops Extension Agent for South Florida, Jay Osborne. And so you will be hearing and seeing a lot more today. And really the first thing I just briefly want to go through, and I don't think anybody has done this, is just give you an overview of the tropical fruit industry in South Florida first. Then I'm going to go into some environmental issues with tropical fruits, and then probably stop if there's time. I do have another presentation. So I'm going to talk about the industry here in South Florida. And in South Florida, the main production area for tropical fruits is Miami-Dade County. About 85% of the industry and the acreage is here, although we do find small acreages of tropical fruits all along the southeastern and the southwestern coast. Lee County is the other. Lee and Palm Beach counties are the other two major areas where there's tropical fruits, but Miami-Dade is really the main area. We've got approximately 12,000 acres of commercial production currently. It's worth about $74 million annually in gross sales and at least $137 million in sales impact or economic impact. This does not include the tropical fruit tree nursery industry, which is probably worth about $10 million a year. It's a very, very big industry. Hundreds of thousands of tropical fruit trees are produced in South Florida every year and sold to more urban areas. There's over 800 commercial producers. Other counties, as I mentioned, that are in tropical fruit production include this. I would say about 60% of the producers have a limited horticultural background. About 65% of the producers are part-time producers. This isn't unusual for an agricultural area adjacent to a large urban area. We have people with educational status everywhere from high school and VOTEC through PhDs, MDs, people who have given up their practice, their farm, you name it. The educational status is very wide-ranging. And their career background is also very diverse. So we have, doctors, lawyers, firemen, plumbers, you name it, teachers that are in the tropical fruit industry. Very, very diverse. We do have people that are second and third generation farmers. We have a lot of people that are novice producers just beginning, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs. And these are people that do a lot of research first before they begin producing a tropical fruit, and then they target particular fruits and particular demographics to sell their fruit. And so they're very, a lot of ingenuity and a lot of background before they get into it. A lot of the part-time producers are on their second or third career. So we have people that have retired, or they retired and they work, and then they retire again, and then they may be in farming. So that's very diverse. And the ethnic background is everything imaginable. Some of this didn't bring out, but very, very diverse. Just a little background, and I'll put this up here to make it easier. We are surrounded by water on three sides, so this tends to make our temperatures less extreme. We don't get as cold, we don't get as hot as inland or to the north of us. Of course, the closer you are to the coast, the warmer it's going to be throughout the year. Our mean annual temperature is about 74 degrees. The extremes, though, we can go down to 21, 22 degrees, and we can go up to 99 degrees or so, but fortunately that's not very common, otherwise it would be a big problem. Our coldest months, December, January, February, we do have a probability, about a 70% probability of freezing each year. And most people are surprised by that. But really, when I say that, that's over a long-term historical record. Really what happens is we generally don't have any freezing weather anywhere from 8 to 12 years or so, and then all of a sudden we'll have 1, 2, or 3, or 4 nights of freezing weather. The last major freeze was actually in 1989. Before that, 1977. Before that, 1962. We have had some minor freezes during, like in 2006. We had one night of freezing weather. So we can get cold. Our wet season is May to October, dry season October to May. And we get about 65 inches of rainfall. And we had a large range in rainfall historically when you look at the climatic record, anywhere from 38 to 95 inches in 1 year. We have a tendency for two main rainfall peaks, June, July, and September, October. So generally what's happening is we get about 2/3 of our rainfall during the rainy season, and we get about 1/3 of our rainfall during the dry season. Now we have had, in the recent history, we had about an 18-month drought, severe drought. In fact, Lake Okeechobee, which is our main reservoir to the north, is actually down about 4 feet from what it should be normally, which may not be a bad thing because they need to reinforce the dike before it goes back up to its limit. But that's another issue. A little bit about some of the industry. We've got about half the acreage is in avocados. We grow at least 60, 61 different commercial varieties. Our season is May through March. The industry is worth, depending on the year, $17 to $21 million annually. We are the major production area for West Indian and West Indian Guatemalan hybrids. It's a very interesting industry. This is just to give you a picture, just to show, this is actually a very minor variety, not being grown much, but this is a West Indian. West Indian, this is one of the major West Indian varieties. Russell is grown commercially on a small scale, and then Miguel would be an example of a West Indian Guatemalan. And you can see the large size on a lot of the fruit. That's one of the our big selling points are. We target people who are used to, or who know, or who are familiar with large size avocados. And that's generally our target. We're not trying to compete with Haas or with the smaller avocado types. Mangoes. We've got about 500 acres. Major 3, 4 commercial varieties. I'll talk about that in a minute. Our season can range from May through September generally. Hard to get a handle on how much the industry is worth, somewhere about $1.5 million. Actually, no one's really taking new statistics on the industry, unfortunately. But we do have an interesting market. We have generally two industries. We have those people growing for the green market, so they're selling and growing fruit for eating green or processing into chutneys or other things, or eating it green and crunchy. So a little bit of diversity of the industry, and then people growing specialty mangoes for specific markets. Kit is really the major variety now in South Florida, and it's a dual-purpose mango. You can eat it when it's immature as a green fruit. In fact, that's the major one people want. And then you can also let it mature and then eat it as a ripe fruit. And it's very good quality. It's a late season when it's mature. But many, and you saw how many cultivars. We have hundreds of cultivars in South Florida. Lychee. Right now, at one time, we had up to about 1,400 acres of lychee. It peaked a number of years ago. However, now, because of the production problems, we're in a marginal area for climatically for lychee. What I mean by that is we don't get sufficient, reliable, cool weather to cause these trees to stop growing and then trigger them to flower. So the acreage has declined somewhat, also because of competition from offshore, or let's say Mexico or Taiwan, that also their season coincides with ours. So there's been some production issues, some competition issues. However, recently, because there's been such a scarcity of lychee or lychee, however you want to say it, we have seen pretty good prices for those people who do have them. We do have the advantage of being here, so the transportation costs aren't going to be what they are for people trying to bring them in from somewhere else. So in a way, perhaps this high prices for fuel may not be totally a bad thing for our industry, at least temporarily. Our season is generally May through July, worth somewhere between $4 and $10 million. Mauritius is the major cultivar that's grown. We do have some acres that's Brewster. There's many other varieties. I would know a few growers that have quite a bit of acreage of Emperor. Okay, I'm going to talk about longans. This is Kohala, the one you see there. About 900 acres in the state right now. And major commercial variety is Kohala. There's been a lot of varieties tested. We haven't found anything that you could really call more reliable in bearing, which is not an issue right now, by the way. But it is a pretty good quality. There are some people growing some of the other cultivars, worth somewhere between $7 and $10 million. The nice thing about longan, as you probably are all aware, is that it can be induced to flower through the use of potassium chlorate. So we have extended our harvest season to, I don't know about 12 months, but people are certainly trying to do it 12 months of the year. So that has really helped our local industry. Mamey sapote. We've got about 500 acres. This industry has been rather stable for quite a while now. We've got two major cultivars, Magana, which this is Magana, and we also have Pantene. Actually, this is Pantene, I'm sorry. And season, March through August, but there is fruit all year. In fact, this year the Magana was interesting. Since we had such a warm winter, the Magana were actually mature very, very early this year. So we had it through the winter, which normally we don't. So maybe global warming is not all that for some industries. So anyway, worth about $5 to $7 million. Many different cultivars, as I mentioned, but Magana and Pantene, the one I showed you before, is really the two major ones, but there are quite a few other cultivars and a number of selections under evaluation. Okay, guava. We have at least 400 acres. And actually, this is going to go up by at least 100 acres in the very near future. 2 to 3 major cultivars. Most of the varieties being grown right now are actually proprietary selections made by the producers themselves. So not readily available in the nursery trade, at least at this point. Although you can buy pink types, you can buy the white crunchy types. There's quite a few growers that have selections that they've made or brought in that they're growing themselves and aren't in the nursery trade. Our season really is all year. This is probably an underestimate on how much the industry is worth. We basically have two industries. We have the pink and mature, where people pick the fruit mature and let them ripen. And that's mostly a Hispanic American, Latin American market. And then we have the Asian American market, which is green fruit, the white crunchy guava, which you've seen in the stores probably. So we basically have two industries and two markets. So very, very interesting. Some of the culture is different, quite different in the way the fruit is grown and handled. So here's a pink type here. It used to be called Ruby Supreme. It's called Homestead as well. This is one from Taiwan called Century. And this is the white crunchy type, and this would be the more traditional type that we're used to. Papaya. Right now, about 300 acres, and this has actually been quite steady for quite a long time. About 300 acres, 2 to 3 major commercial varieties are being grown. Red Lady and EXP15 are the two most common ones, although we see some people growing Taiwan. Basically, fruit all year round, worth at least $1 to $2 million annually. And you see a lot of diversity in the way it's grown. Everything from using plastic culture like a vegetable system where they make beds and they fumigate and drip tube and the whole 9 yards, to people just making mounds and planting on the mounds with no plastic or drip, but using sprinklers to irrigate the trees. Very, very different. And we basically have two markets. Both the green market, where the fruit are allowed to grow 2 to 4 pounds, harvested and then sold for processing or as a vegetable or in salads as a green fruit, or allowed to mature and then sold in the ripe market. So you'll see that as well as you drive around. Bananas. About 500 acres. This is fluctuated, but I'd say at least 500 acres. 2 to 3 major cultivars. Season is basically all year round. Again, worth $1 to $2 million at least. We have a very interesting industry. We have people that are growing bananas for cooking or cooking bananas. And we have people who are growing bananas for fresh eating. And we also have a market where the male inflorescence is sold and eaten as well. So it's a very, very unique. And also the leaves are sold. Actually, we have one of the major nurseries and person with a lot of knowledge, Don Chafin, is in the back with Growing Bananas. And Don is a great resource on banana culture and what's going on with bananas in South Florida. This is a Hunan Noir, which is called Thai banana. One of the problems we see with bananas is they usually have 2, 3, 4, 5 names. Sometimes different bananas have the same name. But in any event, this is commonly called Thai banana locally. Gluggo is another one, and as I mentioned before, this is the male inflorescence being harvested and used. We also have bananas that are also part of the ornamental landscape. They make an absolutely gorgeous addition to the landscape. And there are hundreds of clones or selections of bananas, every size and shape imaginable, from super dwarfs. I've grown one in my house, inside the house, to giant ones that are 25 feet. And so if you can find a place in your landscape where they're absolutely gorgeous as part of the landscape, regardless of the fruit. There are some Fia types. These are from Honduras. Many, many different types. This in the landscape can be striking contrast. So a lot of uses for bananas. We have a relatively small carambola industry, but this has really settled out to be quite stable in the past 5, 6 years. About 180 acres. Arkin is the major cultivar. That's what this one is here. Our season is generally June through March. The industry is worth somewhere around $8 to $9 million. Half the industry is in Dade County, and half the industry is in Lee County. So very interesting. Quite, as you guys know, carambolas are very, very productive trees. I don't think you need 1,000 acres of carambola. So, and if you have a tree in your yard, the trees in my yard, I keep them rather small, somewhere 8, 10 feet. You're looking at 250 pounds plus per tree. There's no way I eat 500 pounds. So, I don't mind sharing with some of the probably the two second most common ones being grown besides Arkin is Kerry, which is from Hawaii, and D10, which is originally from Malaysia. These are two other very nice carambolas, even for the home landscape as well. Huang Tung is a popular dooryard variety. Okay, let's see what I got. Yeah. Sapodilla. That's, I would say there's more than 30 acres now. We have seen a dramatic increase in the Sapodilla acres recently, which is great. It's a very good crop, very interesting. There's various cultivars. General season, February to June, although we were picking some just recently, actually. How much it's worth, I really do not know. A lot of different cultivars, as I mentioned. Here we have jackfruit. There's at least 17 acres. There are people growing various seedling selections or seedlings from superior varieties. Pretty good season. How much this is worth, I really don't know as well. But we do have a small industry. The anonas. Actually, there's much less acreage of the Atamoya, and I'd say about half the sugar apple acreage that's reported there now. This is two crops that actually, the sugar apple especially, has a very ready-made market. A lot of people from Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans are familiar with the fruit, love the fruit. But the major problems with production, one is the trees don't produce that much fruit. You're looking at 30 to 50 pounds on a sugar apple tree. And so a lot of times the break-even point for a producer is somewhere around 100, 120 pounds. If you're not producing enough fruit on the tree, then that becomes problematic from an economic standpoint. They're also, somewhat labor-intensive if you're going to hand-pollinate them. And then, of course, harvesting. The other major problem, you have an insect called the Annona seed borer. You need to protect the fruit from that, so that's an economic problem. But also the shelf life. You basically pick this, and then you have about 10 minutes to eat it before it falls apart. So, really, I'm exaggerating, but 3-5 days, this is not one you're going to sit in your cooler for the next 3 days. So there is some technology out there that needs to be tried that can slow down the ripening process. So that may come to play in the future. Also, the pollination. There are pheromones that will attract the native druid beetles that pollinate this plant. However, it's not a commercially available product. So that makes it more difficult, because hand pollination is very labor intensive, although it has some advantages, as it is used on cherimoya in California, in Chile, and in other countries. Different types, there's red types. Here's Gettner Atamoya. This was the major Atamoya grown there. The other problem with the sugar apples and the Atamoyas, they do not recover well from hurricanes. Basically, your best bet, through our experience, is if they are heavily damaged from a hurricane, take them out and replant them. Because the plants just linger and slowly die over a long period of time, and you have spent a lot of time and money trying to get the plant to repair itself. They just don't seem to have it in them. So it's much faster. Pull them out, replant, and forget about it. Passion fruit. We've got at least 40 acres at the present time. Probably the most popular one being grown right now is actually Big Purple. It used to be possum, purple possum. But there's been a selection made that's proprietary that somebody's growing that better production, less disease problems. And so that's been replaced. Season, June through December. How much it's worth, I'm not sure, but they're driving the new car and I'm not. So something's going on. Okay. This is possum purple. And there are also some selections of yellow selections that are proprietary that are also being grown. This is one that Bill Whitman had selected years ago. So these are really not, this one's being grown still a little bit, but this one's really not commercially. There's some very large yellow types being grown commercially, but mostly the yellow ones are being used for cottage industry for processing, like ice creams and things like that.
Are they self-pollinating?
These yellow ones, my understanding is the ones are self-pollinating. Yes, which is a great advantage. We're gonna have to, go in with a ninja or something and go in and get some plant material, but it's not available really. Then The most recent industry we've seen is pitaya, or dragon fruit. And this is Hyloceras undatus and a number of hybrids among them, among the different species. There's at least 100 acres, really hard to tell how much acreage. There's acreage down here, there's acreage outside this county. Numerous proprietary selections have been made. There are a lot of cultivars and a lot of selections out there. Season generally February through May, worth, we don't know. Prices have been very good. I suspect it will go the way of most of the tropical fruits, that when the acreage gets too high, the production too high, the price will go down. But people are getting good prices right now. The major two types that are being sold is the white and this like magenta or red. We also have small acreages of star apple or kaimito, and that this acreage has fluctuated up and down over the years. There's been some production problems. There's potential for this industry to expand, certainly. A little bit of white sapote is grown and sold commercially, as is wax jambu and canistel, very small acreages. But certainly if you can find a market. Unfortunately, the wax jambu has an insect pest. It's actually a sap beetle that starts to infest the fruit, and that becomes a big problem. However, in Taiwan and in southern China, they will treat it like the guavas, where the fruit are thin and bagged to exclude the pests. And the fruit get much, much bigger when you do that. If you don't thin those fruit, they stay relatively small. But by thinning, you can have much bigger fruit. And you got to thin them when they're small. Don't wait until they're halfway grown. That's generally true with most fruit. If you want bigger fruit, you got to thin them when they're small. We have people growing monstera. Actually, there's about very little acreage of pomelo left in this area due to citrus greening and citrus canker and the regulators. So very little of that. However, there is about 100 acres of pomelo grown in mid-state, at least for now. I don't know how long it's going to last. If it gets hit with any of those major diseases, it won't be there. There's also about 40 acres of kumquat grown in Pasco County. There used to be quite a bit of acreage here. Again, this is very cold hardy, so it can take the weather up there. And so this is being grown outside of South Florida. Mamoncillo, although we really don't see a lot of commercial acreage in that sense, a lot of dooryard trees are harvested and then the fruit sold on the street in Miami. Very common to see people on the side of the road selling Mamoncillo. It's a crop that has potential, especially if superior selections are brought in or made. Black sapote, tiny little bit grown and sold, not much. That's it on that part of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
John, I see a lot of guavas in the field that are bagged.
Yes.
Do you know what the material that they're using to bag them is and where you can find that for sale?
Yes. The question is about the bagged guava. What is the material that's being used, and can you get that material? Yeah, those bags, a lot of times, well, they may be paper. Probably the most common, though, is a plastic that has like micropores. It's very fine plastic. And the bags are being manufactured offshore for the most part, but you can get them through a number of companies. I don't have that with me, but I've got a list of about 4 companies where you can buy bags, and actually they're bringing the bags in and selling. You'll see bags that are white, you'll see bags that are black, and most recently people are using black bags in the winter because they feel that they get a little bit more enhanced growth during the winter when it's cooler, and the white bags are being used more commonly during this hot period. But in the past we saw paper bags. And I've seen in Asia where people will use newspaper and fold the newspaper and make a bag, and that worked just as well. You don't have to go ahead and spend all this money for bags if you want to go ahead and make your own. Yes.
Potassium chlorate on longan. Where can you get it? Regulatory problems with it, and mode of mechanism?
Yeah. Potassium chlorate is very strong oxidizing agent. It is explosive. It's used in making fireworks. You can get it. It's not easily obtainable, and you can't go buy, an ounce. They're generally selling it in 55-gallon drums. Okay, so you're not going to go to Home Depot and buy potassium chloride. It's not going to happen. You have to handle it very, very carefully. You can't store it with other fertilizers, with other chemicals. If you don't handle it right, it will explode. So it's not something that we recommend to the homeowners. I will tell you there's some recent research that came out of Hawaii. And you'll hear more about that, and you'll probably see a publication on it where they have used sodium chlorate, salt, and they have used chlorine, bleach, and gotten a similar effect. So that information is available if you go up on the web. It hasn't been tested down here. We're going to test it just to get the parameters, so when people ask us, especially dooryard people, and they want to make their lawn tree flower, that they could, go out and take the salt, sprinkle it on their trees, or chlorine. So yeah, the mode of action, nobody knows actually the mode of action for the potassium chloride. It's doing something.
Been online that it would only work in warm winter areas.
Would that
leave me out in California because we get cool.
Yeah. No, actually, yeah. Let me back up and say, yeah. There are a lot of requirements you need to meet before you can use this material. The tree has to be quiescent, and what I mean by that is basically dormant. It can't be flushing. It can't have recently flushed. So you want old, mature leaves. The tree has to be healthy. If the tree is not healthy, this is not going to work. You have to remove the leaf litter under the tree. You have to apply the right dose and water it in, and you have to water the tree. So there's a number of requirements before this stuff will actually work for you. Was that part of it? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go on and talk about something else.
Jonathan,
Yes.
a question.
Yeah.
Is there any money allocated to releasing insects, sterile insects to combat fruit flies or fruit like the wax jumbo and the guavas in Florida?
Actually, that's already being done. The question was, is there any research being or money for releasing sterile male fruit flies, which would then disrupt the breeding behavior or the breeding cycle of Caribbean fruit fly? And actually, that's already being done. And there are also at least 2 parasitic wasps that have been released during the past 30 years that have actually reduced the Caribbean fruit fly population by about 40%. It's just that, it's just that, one worm in the fruit is one worm in the fruit. So instead of 60, you have 40. So that's not really going to work. But those parasites have been released, and they help. And we do have some fruit fly-free areas in Florida, primarily the grapefruit production area. You're not allowed to plant guava, you're not allowed to plant wax jambu, you're not allowed to plant any host of the Caribbean fruit fly in that area. And they release thousands and thousands of males to disrupt the breeding in that area. And they have inspectors and monitoring throughout the year. That has not been done here. If people wanted something like that to happen down here, I think that they would have to get together and go to USDA APHIS and tell them they want to do that down here. But without a groundswell of popular support for that, that's not going to happen down here. But, I mean, there's nothing to say that it couldn't if people got together and advocated for it. Yes? Yeah, you had your hand.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was in the back. Yeah?
Charlie Law wants to know if there is a new variety out there of guava that is resistant to the Caribbean fruit fly.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of work that's been done on the Caribbean fruit fly, and there are volatiles given off by the fruit which attract the fruit fly. And there are differences in volatiles and the attractiveness of the fruit of the different cultivars. I really don't have that information. It's not, that work is actually in progress. USDA has been doing a lot of that work. We're going to hear more and find out more about that because there's a lot of work being done on the volatiles right now on guava. A large interest in finding out what the volatiles are and what they do and what part they play. So I would say in the next couple of years we're going to have a much better handle on the differences between the cultivars or between the types of guava and their attractiveness. But yeah, there's been noted, some of the white types are much more attractive than the pink types. But I think it's going to end up being cultivar dependent because there's a lot of hybrids out there.
So there's nothing out there?
Nothing out there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
just a quick comment about the longon trees and the pigs. The Hawaii tropical fruit growers recommend just buy 2 big gallons or a gallon and a quarter of Clorox, and in the dormant period, just take a straight Clorox and go all around the drip line with it. It may or may not work.
It's cheap.
Cheap insurance, better than the baseball bat.
Clean the dirt out.
Or the chainsaw. Yeah.
Understand the signs are all
Just an
invasion of Africanized honeybees in this area?
Yeah, the Africanized honeybee is already here. It's in Florida and spreading.
That's it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it at Homestead per se, but it is in South Florida. It's moving, it's spreading. So we're going to hear and see much more about that as time goes on because they tend to out-compete the Europeans.
How far south are they?
I don't know, I think as far south at least the Broward. Yeah, I'd have to go look and see what the map shows. But
These are just scattered cycles, not a wave.
that's right. Yeah, it's not like it's not like a tidal wave coming in.
But any swarm of bees or a hive
Yeah,
should really be approaching very cautiously.
yeah, exactly. Yes,
What stage are the guavas being oviposited?
when they're about golf ball size. I'm going to go on to the next thing. At about golf ball size is when they're being oviposited into. I'm going to talk a little bit about some notes for tropical fruit growers, some things. These are some websites that are available. I have a website called Fruitscapes. I don't know, some of you have seen this probably. I'll just leave this up here. And I have a bookmark with this website on it. So if anybody wants a bookmark, I've got bookmarks here, and this has the website with it. And it focuses on temperate, tropical, and subtropical fruits and growing them in your landscape at home. And we've got information on, I think it's about 40 different fruit crops. And basically, we do everything but go out and fertilize the tree for you. So it should be pretty helpful. So feel free to take a bookmark. There's of course, a lot of other organizations that have information on growing tropical fruit crops. Okay, I'm going to talk about some environmental stresses that people don't usually talk about. Okay, I'm going to talk about light and heat stress. And give you an example with Arcan carambola. This light stress and heat stress mostly occurs under high light and cool environmental conditions. So you've got high light and it's cool out. And this can occur during normal warm and hot conditions sometimes if the light is high enough and if it's dry enough, and also in well-watered plants. And so what I've got here is here's normal leaves here. And carambola is one of these plants that when it gets under too high a light, or it starts to get under heat stress, or actually drought stress as well, folds its leaves. And you can easily see this even in well-watered trees. And so this tree is very well watered, very well taken care of, and here you have leaves that are under mottled sunlight. Carambola is actually moderately shade tolerant. You can grow carambola quite well with 20% shade. So these leaves are under moderate sunlight. However, this is out on the edge of the canopy under full, intense sunlight. So you see the leaves, and this is at the same time. This was the same day, same moment. Folds its leaves down. So it reduces its exposure to high light and to losing water. Okay? And so what I'm talking about, normally this is something else. It's called photooxidation. And you'll see this sometimes, again, under high light conditions, which can be during the winter. Remember, we're closer to the sun in the winter, so it's high intense light, but cool environmental conditions. So here we are, normal conditions. Normally what happens is sunlight, part of it hits the leaf and is absorbed and is used to fix carbon in photosynthesis. Okay? Some of the light is actually reflected off the leaf. And some of the light under normal conditions ends up heating up the leaf a little bit. And so that's why the leaves have stomata that lose water, evaporate water, and that cools the leaf off. Okay, so a little bit of the light is being used to heat up the leaf, but most of it's reflected or absorbed. All right? All right. However, photoinhibition or photooxidation, heat stress, this occurs high light intensity, cool temperatures. Commonly occurs in the winter, and I've seen it in all these plants. And what's happening now is because of the cold temperatures, the photosynthetic system has slowed down. And so if it could take 100 units of sunlight during the summer, the system can only take, let's say, 40 right now. So what happens with that light is less of it's absorbed. You may get the same reflectance possibly. However, a lot of that excess light now is heating up the biochemistry of that leaf. And so this messes up photosystem 2 especially. It actually damages it. And then you don't get photosynthesis. And so the leaf is actually damaged. And you can see this. This is a good example. This is velvet apple. So here's normal leaf. Here's photooxidation. Okay? So you might see this, especially here in California, some other areas where it gets cool in the winter. And so basically all it is that photosynthetic system just can't operate as quickly in the winter, and so it ends up getting damaged by high light intensity. Okay?